Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sports Tech Allstars podcast. Today, I'm in conversation with Steven Webster, CEO of asensei. Asensei is a computer vision based motion recognition platform. Essentially, it uses a device camera to not just record and capture your movement, but recognize exactly what you're doing and provide coaching insights about how you can improve it. The key here is that it's not just an application. The key here is that they're not just building a new consumer facing fitness app with computer vision. No, they are a B2B focused platform providing an ingredient technology that other apps can use. A fascinating conversation with Steven, where we cover why exactly he got into this space, his background in karate coaching, of all things, and the very far reaching applications that such a solution could have. Here's my conversation with Steven Webster. Welcome to the show. I want to hear first, tell me a little bit about what made you set up asensei. I know you've got a very interesting background in terms of different roles that you've worked in, also a founder yourself before, but walk me through that journey to setting up asensei.
I think, first of all, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here. But, I think it's one of those classic scratching an itch you've had yourself problems and then realizing that you're quite uniquely positioned to solve it. So the itch, both as an athlete and a coach, and I played a lot of sport growing up as a kid, but I was disproportionately obsessed with martial arts. First, jiu-jitsu. And then when I went to study at university, I wanted to compete in a sport and have some life outside the library. And so I joined the karate club and very quickly competed and captained and ended up coaching the club for over a decade. And so, as a student and as an athlete, I wanted to train with the best instructors in the world. And I was very lucky being at a university club. You can email someone and say, if I was to fly you to Edinburgh, take you whiskey tasting and have a room full of students to teach for a weekend, would you come? And, that allowed us to bring a lot of world-class instructors to the club. So I was kind of lucky to be able to do that, but most people can't. And then, I also kind of became in demand as a coach as well. So people that were studying with these instructors, they wanted me to go and visit the club. So I got to travel all over Europe, to Australia, to the US, coaching, seminar weekends. I was the one taken whiskey tasting or whatever the local equivalent was. But as a coach, it was very hard and almost frustrating to try and teach people when you only see them once or twice a year, and trying to have a website or trying to send them videos, or we were making CD-ROMs and booklets. It's just very hard to learn physical exercise unless there's an expert there in the room that can see you, understand what you're doing, and intervene in the moment. So that was kind of the problem that I'd experienced both as an instructor, as a coach, and as a student, as an athlete.
Sorry, give me a rough timeline here. What year are we talking about?
Oh
When
my
was this
goodness. I
happening?
was at university in the late 90s, and I was coaching, I think I had one of the first karate websites on the internet, no joke, kind of like 95. So yeah. And listen, as an instructor, it wasn't even iPods. It was before the iPod. If you remember the Diamond Rio MP3 player, I was recording myself on MP3 player so students could have a recording of me talking them through the movements.
That's
So
what
it
I
was
was trying to
really,
set. I was trying to set like what tech access you had at that point in time.
yeah.
This is almost predating CDs a bit. Like, how do you exchange information for you to actually do that form correction that you want to do as an instructor, right?
Yeah, I was literally just text descriptions on websites. I
Right.
was getting video online. We didn't have phones that recorded video, right? So I was literally taking VHS cassettes and, buying video capture cards to turn them into, Windows media files and putting videos on like Real Player. We were back in those days of can I get video online? But fast forward all the way to my last real job, which was at Microsoft before Asensei. So now, I'm getting to know the guys that invented Microsoft Connect, the guys and gals that invented Microsoft Connect. I'm working in Xbox Fitness and alongside those teams. And I had a moment of like, wait a minute. Yeah, I think all of the technology that we need to see someone and observe them and intervene and coach them, it's starting to happen. And it was just one of those really compelling moments of like, I think I can start a company where we can have the experience of, if I'm playing ice hockey, I've got Wayne Gretzky in my ear. If I'm playing basketball, I've got Steph Curry in my ear. Like my idols can be in my ear, coaching me and encourage me and teaching me. And that was kind of, in a nutshell, the vision for what the company would be.
And this is also kind of predating our current understanding or our current usage of AI, right? The way we understand computer vision, the way we think of how it's like almost just a word that everybody throws around. It wasn't as commonly used, let's say in I think you're in Microsoft, what is it, 2012 to 14, right? So this is the very, very early days of artificial intelligence and how it's being adopted. Why was the application for you so obvious in fitness? I mean, there are a number of, I mean, apart from your background,
Yeah.
was there something in the market that told you, hey, this is the right application for this tech set?
Well, I think it's a great example of, and I'm sure you see this. You see a lot of startup decks where, and I see them as well, where they're kind of like a technology looking for a problem to solve rather than
Yeah.
starting with a problem and looking for technology. So why fitness and why sport? I really started in sport more than fitness. You know, I was like, we could coach karate, we could coach skiing, we could coach snowboarding. That was kind of the world I was first in. Um, I, I made the commitment to start at the top of Snowmass Mountain in Colorado because I sucked at skiing and my wife was better than me. She grew up in Colorado. And it was definitely one of those moments like, I wish I was getting real time feedback. I wish I was getting told when to turn. Am I bending my knees too soon? So I just really, as a coach and an athlete, I really was frustrated by the idea that it should be possible to have real time coaching that doesn't require an actual trainer in front of me. And this was at the time of Nike Plus shoe pods and, Fitbit and, the quantified self. It was right at that time that, technology was starting to attach to the body and, what could we see and what could we observe. And listen, at that time, it was a big step forward to say we're going to go from
Mhm.
tracking steps with like an IMU on your belt all the way to we're going to track your entire body and your motion and give you real time feedback. But I love that saying, like, never mistake a clear line of sight for a short distance. I had this very clear line of sight. I could see where things would inevitably go, but it's certainly not been a short distance. It's been a decade.
I like that line. I might steal it.
I stole it
Which
from someone else.
perfectly
Yeah.
gives me a nice line of sight to my next question, which is, of course, walk me through a sensei. What exactly is the problem that you're solving, which you've addressed a bit? And more importantly for now, how do you solve it?
We've made human movement something a machine can understand. It's that simple. And so, why did we do that? It's for all the reasons I explained. It's like if a machine can see you and understand what you're doing, we can then feed that as context into AI to then make decisions about should we be coaching you? Do we need to coach you immediately? Do we give you feedback later? Do we give you feedback now? But at the essence, that's a problem we've solved. And we call this category movement recognition. So it's very analogous to speech recognition. And I think you're kind of doing this. Let's go back in time. If we go back in time to, if you remember Dragon Dictate, you're sitting in Microsoft Word with a microphone and you're dictating and it gets if you're Scottish, it gets it 50% right. If you're American, it gets it 80% right. And at the time, the prevailing mindset was like, it's just faster to type. Okay, it's faster to type. Nobody needs speech recognition. Then fast forward today, we're all sitting with note takers in our meeting that are, picking out who's speaking and what they're saying and summarizing the meeting. And we've forgotten that the very core underlying enabling technology that makes all that possible is speech recognition. And we've got flawless understanding of what people are saying. So we're doing the same for movement. So how do we do it? There's really three things. The first is motion capture. The second is movement recognition. And the third piece is coaching intelligence. I'll focus on the first for now. So the first is what's called pose estimation. That's generally well understood. That's how can you use a regular camera. We can work with, fancier cameras, LiDAR and depth cameras, but our superpower is just how do we take that cheap RGB camera that's in your webcam, your TV, or, laptop, and how from that do we get a 3D skeleton? Do we pick out all the marks on the body that allow us to construct a 3D skeleton? Now, that skeleton doesn't know where it is in the room. The origin, if you like, is at the hips, and every other bone is relative to where the hips are. So it actually doesn't even know if it's upright or upside down. Our
Mhm.
eyes kind of tell us, but the machine doesn't know itself. So the second thing we've done is we've moved that origin from the hips to the lens of the camera. So we have a spatial AI algorithm, a spatial computer vision algorithm that allows us to see exactly how far is each part of the body from the lens of the camera. And so now we know, are you moving left? Are you moving right? We detect where the floor is, and we can detect how high you've moved off the ground, or any one part of your body has moved off the ground. So now we see the athlete moving in space. And then finally, We have another computer vision pipeline for equipment recognition. So we can train the machine to recognize something as simple as a bench or a bat or a ball. But even if you've seen the interchangeable dumbbells where you put a dumbbell on the ground, you click the
Hmm.
handle and it changes the weight, we can detect that you're holding a particular dumbbell and what weight it is as well. So we've turned the smartphone into a scale. So now we've got this really good picture of what you're doing in front of that camera. The movement recognition, and that's our core IP. That's how we know, are you doing a kettlebell press? Are you swinging a baseball? Are you doing a roundhouse kick? We're able to detect what you're doing and assess how well you're doing it against someone else's definition of what good looks like. So we're not the arbiter of good technique. We're
Hmm.
just almost the referee of it. If you tell us what you want to look for, we'll look for it in the way that you say. And then the final piece, the coaching intelligence, I'll wrap that up really simply as we can turn that into a synthetic clone voice of the actual coach that you wish you were training with and put them in your ear and have them speaking to you and coaching you and correcting you. We have lots of different coaching experiences, but fundamentally, that's what we're unlocking and enabling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, at the core of it, so three parts again: motion capture, you see what I'm doing; movement recognition, you understand what I'm doing; and third is the coaching part, is you guide me on what I'm doing,
Yeah,
right? Which is a really, I mean, that's what you want. Now, even this technology, listeners to this pod would probably be fairly advanced in their knowledge, or reasonably advanced in the knowledge of sports technology. So I might have seen various types of computer vision based tools for football training, for
yeah,
fitness, for whatever. But again, going back a few years, this is pretty radical technology, and I want to seat it in a. You didn't seat it in a particular sport. I've seen solutions that do this for one sport, for a
right.
golf swing, for a baseball swing, for a cricket bat swing. Typical things, whether it's static movement, a tennis serve, for example, static movement or certainly confined movement. But you made it kind of free as just form of fitness, like just movement of the human physiology. That I want to understand a bit more of why you went down that path. And B, probably the part that you haven't touched on, how you deliver the solution, is what, at least for brought your company on my radar, is that you're B2B focused.
Yeah.
You're not looking to build a consumer brand, which a lot of people are doing. You're saying, hey, we provide the picks and shovels, that kind of approach. Why those two things? Why'd you start with general physiology versus a specific sport? And second, why do you take the B2B approach?
I mean, it really taps back all the way to my intrinsic motivation for starting the company. Like, why do you quit Microsoft? Like, life is relatively straightforward and easy when you work for Microsoft. Why did you quit Microsoft and start another company? And my intrinsic motivation was I just want to do something kind of really meaningful. Like I want to feel like, I've worked on a technology that has large scale impact. And my head was in the space of like, what can I do in health and healthcare and what can I do in digital health and the transformation of digital health? But I'm not a doctor. I'm not I don't come from a medical background. And also the healthcare industry, as many of us know, it's a very hard industry to introduce a company into for a whole bunch of reasons. It might be legislative. It might be just the complexity of the system. And also, it's an industry that likes to buy from people that you've sold to their competitors before. It's a very reference-based company. So there's a cold start problem in healthcare that you have to establish reputation. So the kind of slight shift left I made is like, wait a minute, I've coached sport my entire life. And that's had huge impact on the students that I've coached. I kept hearing that from students. It's like, I came to Edinburgh University to study law or medicine or physics, but I learned more in the karate club and more on the mat and more being part of a team. And so the phrase I like to use is if you can unlock someone's athletic potential or give them a glimpse of their athletic potential and how to achieve it, you let them do that for their broader human potential. You bring out the best in them through sport. So that was my intrinsic motivation. And I share that with you because why are we in ingredient technology? I couldn't possibly introduce this tech to every possible sport, one after
Right.
another. And if I really wanted to have that kind of scale, that bigger scale and that bigger impact, I realized immediately we need to be an ingredient technology. And speech recognition is a very good analogy. And there's a button on the steering wheel that you can press to turn the windshield wipers on and off or the radio on and off. Tesla didn't spin up a speech recognition team to build the underlying tech for that button. You go and license Nuance. You go and license the leader in speech recognition. And that's how I felt very strongly would be the case with movement recognition as well, is it's a very hard problem. My CTO likes to say, if you think it's easy, you just haven't thought about it as hard as me, as hard as him. And he took a speech recognition company public that he built before asensei. And so, it's a very hard problem to solve. And so my belief was It's going to be a must-have capability across a broad. I mean, today we're talking fitness and sport. We're doing a lot of work in digital healthcare. Maybe by the time this podcast is live, we'll have our first robotics customer that I can talk about as well. Actually, physical AI, where this will be in a robot form factor, assisting people. I think almost like a smart wheelchair, something that's like assisting people with mobility. So there's a myriad of applications for what you can do once a machine can understand human movement. To get to scale, it needed to be an ingredient, a technology that others license and put into their products. As an investor, you also have to focus. If everything's equal, nothing's important, right? And so we had to pick something very focused, and fitness, partly because of our passion, but it's not as regulated as healthcare. It seemed a good place to start and to kind of figure out, how do we make this technology work at scale?
Also, the core ingredient for sport, let's say, or just for human general well-being, to make sure your fitness level is high. Okay, cool. So you understood. I think we set the context well. Let's get to part B, the B2B side. Why
Yeah.
not just go build out your own consumer application, which we've seen a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But I think you've referenced that in your previous answer, that it's better to build one focus, which is deliver a great product, not perhaps worry too much about because a B2C business is a completely different animal to build, right?
Different sales motion, right? It's
Yeah.
also, it's very hits-based business. The switching costs are low. Like, it's hard. Like, I've got a lot of respect for anyone that builds a B2C business. We did introduce a B2C product, but not because that was our intent to be a B2C business. But I think one of the things you have to be careful when you're building a platform technology, at Microsoft, we often threw around this phrase of dog fooding our technology, eating your own dog food or sipping your own champagne is maybe the better way of saying it. So we did dog food asensei, and so we built actually a iOS only, because it was, to learn, we didn't need to be on iOS and Android. We're just like, iOS only. Let's build a direct to consumer app, and we picked indoor rowing because it felt like for a lot of reasons it was a sport where technique and form are the difference between your score. There's not a lot else influences. It's not a team sport. There's not strategy. There's not weather. But when you're indoor on a rowing machine, it's good form is free speed, as one of the coaches said to us. And so we used indoor rowing as a microcosm of the broader ecosystem. We worked with athletes, we work with Olympic coaches and former Olympians in rowing. We work with governing bodies like British Rowing. We work with equipment manufacturers like Concept 2, just to really kind of get a sense of, what does the ecosystem need from us? And most importantly, what are the user experiences that the end user, the athlete, enjoys best? And so we did a lot of learning. That app is still in the App Store and is still generating revenue, but it's really almost a side. It runs itself at this point, but we did a lot of consumer learning there. But no, the goal was always, how do we become an ingredient technology in other people's products? The analogy everybody always thinks of is Intel, the Intel Inside. I'm a big fan of Dolby, the audio company, and you wouldn't buy a TV or a soundbar that didn't have Dolby Atmos. Even if you couldn't tell me what Dolby Atmos is and what it does, you just understand that mark, that brand stands for good quality audio. And so that's how we feel about Asensei, is we want people, hey, I'm going to buy that product over there because I know that one's powered by Asensei. I know what that means.
There you go, the power of branding. Exactly. You said I couldn't explain what Dolby does, and hopefully at some point in time I'll be buying products where a sensei is involved, and I will be able to explain a little bit of what a sensei does. Let's talk about who you do it for. I know you've already had some successful, some pretty large names in the industry that you're servicing, and it's been a journey. It's not been a short path. So you've been around for a few years. Walk us through some of the more successful use cases and maybe some unsuccessful ones as well.
I think we've got any unsuccessful ones.
Okay. All right, Steven. All right. We'll hold you to that. Let's see how that comes
I
back.
don't want to throw anyone
With
under
fair
the
play.
bus.
Fair play.
So I love that Nike phrase, if you have a body, you're an athlete. We kind of picked up on that. And so internally at Asensei, we talk about the different archetypes of athlete that we serve. So let me talk about the archetype of athlete and then the customers we work with that serve that athlete, right? So, there's the everyday athlete, the weekend warrior, the person that wants to have a, connected fitness product in their home or a digital fitness app. And so, we work with a number of those companies, some of the ones that we've shared publicly. Center, Chris Hemsworth's fitness company, were one of the companies that adopted us a few years ago. Most recently, Tonal. I think that was one that made everyone sit up and take notice, because Tonal are a great example of a company who had heavily invested themselves in having teams of, they've got a fantastic team of biomechanists and AI and computer vision capability. But ultimately, they made the decision to partner with Asensei from motion analysis. So that's I could, list out customer after customer, but connected fitness products, digital fitness apps, that's a square example. Another customer I'll talk about, because I think is really relevant for sport, but it's actually a military customer, a company called ReadyFit. So the problem ReadyFit are solving is twofold. One, there's just not enough people that are fit enough to serve in the military. They talk about obesity as a national security crisis. So we need to be able to find more people that have a proclivity to serve and give them the tools they need to pass the military fitness test. So ReadyFit have a product where if you decide you want to be a US Navy SEAL, or you want to join the Army, or you want to join the Navy, there's a very specific military fitness test that you need to train for and be able to do. And today, you need to drive to some Air Force base somewhere in the middle of nowhere and take the test. And and if you fail, you're maybe not going to drive back again the next weekend. And so they've put that digital. So using asensei, you can train for the fitness test to the way that test is administered. I could tell you the 14 different ways push-ups get measured depending on the branch of the military. And then ultimately, you can submit your fitness test as a video, but asensei is used to adjudicate the video. So how many pull-ups did you do? How many push-ups did you do? How long did you hold a plank for? Sensei is kind of powering the digital referee of that. Now, it's the military, so it's trust but verify. But you now start thinking about competitions like CrossFit or High Rocks and, all those kind of, fitness competitions. We now have the technology to adjudicate those technologies. So I really like that kind of space. And then, I could go on and on. I think two more I would talk about is the industrial athlete. 80% of the global workforce and the US workforce work in a physically demanding job that's deskless. So it's a factory floor worker, it's a FedEx driver, and you're lifting and turning and squatting and pulling and pressing. And so our technology is getting used by platforms that the first thing they'll do is they'll movement screen. So you maybe join a company where you're going to do a physically demanding job. We can assess your movement and make decisions like, you don't look like someone that, you might have poor shoulder mobility, so we don't want you lifting heavy weight above your body. You might have poor torso rotation, so something that's constantly turning. Either you shouldn't be doing that job, or we should be prescribing you some mobility exercises to make sure you stay injury-free. And then obviously, if you get injured, we want to help you return to work. So we're working with companies who serve the industrial athlete. And then finally, digital healthcare. And this was always, going back to my intrinsic motivation, it was very much like, one day, if we get this right, we'll be helping people with their healthcare. So, number of different examples, just virtual physical therapy, which really kind of took off over the pandemic, where you can actually do your physical therapy at home. And anyone that's ever gone home with, their sheet of instructions from their PT and actually stuck to their PT, you're in a minority. Adherence is very poor. So with virtual PT, essentially as a technology, if you can't remember the exercise, we can teach it to you. If you step back on the wrong leg, we can tell you. We can track your work. So we're not counting reps, because when you're doing PT, you don't really care, did I do 10 reps or did I do 9 reps? But in the US, the insurance company cares, because they don't want to reimburse you for insurance unless they can prove adherence. So that's virtual PT, mainly for musculoskeletal injuries, bad backs, knees, shoulders. But we also have customers in neurological or stroke patients who are trying to recover motor control, and they have PT protocols that Asensei is watching and administering. And then we recently announced a partnership with a company called Carry Prehab, and they're solving the problem of osteoporosis and osteopenia. So, women, particularly kind of premenopause and perimenopause, much higher likelihood of bone fractures because of bone density. And as it turns out, there's programs of prehabilitation that you can do that will reduce that risk of injury. And so they're using Asensei, again, to movement assess and identify at-risk populations, and then give them the strength and yoga training that are like digital pharmaceuticals. So I'm trying to give you a sense of, when you've solved that problem of movement recognition, it's not just counting reps in the gym, right? It unlocks all of these different use cases. And I think the thing that's in common and there's digital technology has always allowed us to reach people at scale. And so we're able to kind of reach these populations at scale and broader access to it, kind of care and coaching.
Powerful stuff. I mean, there's so many applications of it, especially the last one, the around rehabilitation care, and perhaps even being preventative rather than just curative or reactive.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the ones that you can really see the scale. You don't even have to ask somebody to think about it, but always start step by step. And I think the application in sport, just in focus and improvement, is already a very strong one. One step back and looking at the space in general, outside of your own solution, are there any trends around the fitness tech industry, either from let's say wearables or hardware driven, or just pure software, that you're particularly intrigued by and let's say not directly acting on, because if you were, if
Yeah.
it was possible to include it in a sense, I'm sure you would. But is there something that you're looking at? Hey, that's a space that I'm keeping a close eye on.
I'm actually keeping a much closer eye. So in sport, the things that I get excited about tend to be the things that we are like in reach of and in touch of. That's kind of the world.
Sure.
So I love the digital adjudication and the digital referees, taking competition, the home or out to the gym floor and being able to kind of compete in leaderboards and just the digitization of sport. It's what I wanted as a kid. I mean, my dad was an electrical engineer and I had a soldering iron in my bedroom and I was like, can I make my punch bag tell me my reaction time? Can my hockey goals spin a light when the ball hits the back of the net? It was kind of that nerdy kid that wanted that kind of engagement and feedback. And, so I'm really excited about that. I think we could just elevate the experience of sport. Like my son is 11 and, he has a basketball with a sensor in it. It's one of our portfolio companies, SIQ, and we had one of the first SIQ basketballs. And, his phone makes a swoosh noise every time the ball goes in the net. It's makes or misses. And like these delightful touches of hiding the technology inside the product. So it's never a connected product that becomes part of an ecosystem. I'm really excited by that. There's a lot of focus on wearables right now, and I've maybe a little bit of a controversial take here, but I see the fitness industry getting excited about it. I'm excited for the healthcare industry. So my son also recently, just about 18 months ago, was diagnosed as type 1 diabetic. I mean, that's a big change. And so I'm so thankful for continuous glucose monitor technology. Every 5 minutes, I know if my son's blood sugar is crashing or spiking. He doesn't wear an insulin pump. He's not there yet. Not every kid wants to do that. But with an insulin pump and a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, you have a closed loop digital pancreas. Like you've replaced a capability of the body. And I mean, it's amazing. They're very small devices, but they
Yep.
will get smaller and smaller. So I'm excited that there's that element of the fitness industry that's kind of the longevity crowd, the biohacking crowd. It's like, I want to know my glucose. I want to know from a human performance perspective. They probably have Peter Attia's book on their desk or listen to Andrew Huberman. I'm excited that there's a corner of the fitness community that's excited by that, because I think it's driving funding into those technologies for people like my son who need it for healthcare. So that's where I'm excited on wearable, non-invasive glucose monitoring, and just all the things that we can do there. For sports, I think we're starting to measure a lot of what doesn't matter so much for the general population, knowing your glucose response to certain foods. It's a marginal gain. I'm much more interested in, the problems that we're solving with asensei is how can we get someone that's intimidated to do something through that intimidation by allowing them to do it in the psychological safety of their home and with the digital safety of having a coach. So I'm much more excited about how do we get more people participating in sport and fitness for the reason, back to my intrinsic motivation, because if we can unlock people's athletic potential, we unlock even more.
Make that big stride forward. Interesting that you mentioned SIQ. I've got a basketball
Oh,
sitting
you
in the
do?
other
You do?
room, and
Yeah.
I will have Eric as part of the series,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
believe. But
yeah.
yeah, we
I'm
should get him
kicking
on for
myself.
sure.
I was in Santa Monica a few weeks ago and I forgot to reach out to him, so I should have.
Super interesting. Actually, I met him in Berlin when he visited. Eric, if you're listening, we have to set this up. All right. I think really good, interesting perspective. I especially like the wearable side, and there's so much on the health side that you can benefit from, especially from continuous monitoring of various things, from glucose to lactate to
Exactly.
various things. But as you mentioned, it's not just the incremental gains of performance. There is a much bigger problem that it can solve. So not just like for sport performance, that these things, once implemented at scale, can just have a huge impact on society. All right. Speaking of impact, what's coming up? Walk me through what the next 12, 18 months looks like for a sensei.
Yeah, I think that we are all the way to the edge. So Asensei runs on device. Like that's something that we had to work very hard to make possible, but we didn't want to require an internet connection, a Wi-Fi connection, cloud compute, because that introduces latency. You can't provide real-time feedback if you've got latency in compute. So we've always run on device. But, I think, we're all very enchanted by LLMs and our ability to have a conversation who's not using ChatGPT or something similar. And that's really the missing piece of the puzzle, the missing piece that we always wanted to. Can I have Steph Curry in my son's ear coaching him on the 3-point shot? Can I have Bruce Lee in my ear coaching me karate? That's what I wanted as a kid. Can we put the voice of a coach in your ear? And so we're doing a lot of work right now, our AI team, for on-device LLMs. So when it's on-device, it's not like a general purpose chat GPT. It knows a lot about a little. So this is like, how do I have an LLM that understands the grammar of human movement? And then on top of that, understands just good practice in sport coaching. Like, how should you cue? What language should you use? When should you intervene? When do you coach somebody who's doing something well rather than saying they're doing something wrong? It's like, that was a good one, Roland. Can you feel how your heel was on the ground here? You had good connection and that gave you more movement through your hip. So, how do we layer in just like best practice coaching? Then on top of that, how do we layer on a syllabus? So if you learn to row from British rowing, that might be different. If you learn to row from New Zealand rowing, they might have a different point of view on the progression that you should take someone through. I think of that as a martial artist as like, what's your white belt to black belt syllabus? Every style of karate has a different white belt to black belt syllabus. So now we layer that on. And then finally, we can train the LLM on the actual coach or the actual athlete. Like, what do they say? How do they say? What experience do they have that they can, like, I remember when I was in the final of the Grand Slam, blah, 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 so they can kind of bring their personal experience. And so that's what we're developing right now, on-device LLM. That means it's no longer a one-way conversation where the coach is, interrupting and speaking to you, but you can be conversational back and forth with the coach. So we're working on that today. That's running and staging in various shapes and forms. And I'm really excited for us to bring that to market. And our customers are looking for that as well. I think anyone in digital health and fitness who's also playing with ChatGPT are making that connection of like, wait a minute, if I could talk to my physical therapist, if I could talk to my practitioner, if I could talk to my coach. But as we also know with, GPT, it can go off the rails, and so how do you put those guardrails in place so that the coach is only coaching what it knows and not pretending to know stuff that you ask it as well. So
And
I'll
especially,
just leave it at that.
especially,
That's super exciting for me that we're
no,
working.
super exciting. Sorry, I was just going to say, especially with movement, that's a big risk that you're taking, right? I mean, you don't
Right.
want to get somebody in a bad spot and injure themselves. No, it sounds super fascinating. I mean, a little part of the future already running
Yeah.
on, let's say, on your beta. So yeah, can't wait to test that out.
Yeah.
Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before I
Sure.
let you go, my last question that I always end the pod on. I want to know, what has been your favorite sporting moment?
That's an easy one. So my karate club, the first time we won the British Championships at University of Warwick. I mean, I can feel it in my chest, just the pride and the emotion of it. It was a peak experience for me as a coach and for us as a club. It was probably about 4 years in, 5 years in, from me taking over a club that was about to just disappear. The club was on the brink of collapse. And we won some Scottish championships, so kind of at a regional, national level. But to go to the British Championships where, I would never have dared walk in the room as a student. Like, we just weren't of the caliber to walk in there. And suddenly the entire room is like, where did Edinburgh University come from? Like, who are these guys? And, I can remember particular matches and particular moments and particular sweeps and particular kicks that were like, this is getting closer and closer. Like, we could win the overall championship. And that means winning the most medals in every category, male, female, kumite, fighting and forms. And we did. We won that tournament. It wasn't the first time we won it, but it was the best time. And so, yeah, I'm Scottish, so I don't have any national team victories to celebrate. We don't win anything. We snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But yeah, taking Edinburgh University to the BUSA, the British University Sports Championships, and winning it for the first time, peak experience. The trophy is over there. I can see it from here.
I don't know if it's just the camera, but everything just turned a bit rosy and there's more
Yeah,
pride from your end on that answer. Brilliant stuff. Great way to end the pod. So why I always ask
yeah.
that question, because it just, yeah, there's so much energy the sport can give. And it's amazing to hear in the ways that a sensei can deliver some of that energy back to its users. Steven, once again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.